Well, well, well.
Three holes in the ground.
Always. Always. Oh, man. It's funny. I'm getting
I
all
always
these notifications popping up. Like, right as we go live, suddenly my computer explodes with, like, we're live everywhere, by the way.
messages from your relatives and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just congrats on your success. I don't know what I'm talking about. No, I mean, like, Discord and YouTube and Twitch, everything kind of snaps hard just saying, hey, Drum Geek is live right now. So
that's cool.
yeah. How you been, dude?
Pretty good. Yeah.
You good? You're I how do I say this? We talked about it before stream. I was expecting a little more out of you. Your kid. Yeah, we're doing it. How old is the youngster right now? And
Jagger. He's
and obviously he's a pleasant person to be around.
Yeah, incredibly pleasant.
So
He's almost 2.
Hmm.
And then I have another baby on the way. She's not born yet, but
Yeah.
she's annoyed by her brother too already.
Oh, tell me more.
As
What is
his
the
dad.
process of that?
He's just Jagger's turning 2, so there's a reason they call it terrible twos.
Yeah, they're psychopaths. Yep.
Yeah. Well, so that's what we were talking about. So I was reading a child psychology book, and the person that wrote the book said, by and large, at this point, they kind of could be compared to that mindset because they have no concept of like a 2-year-old would hit you with a knife, but not in like an ill-mannered way.
Totally.
They just if they saw someone hitting someone with a pencil,
Yes.
they could pick up a steak knife and do the same thing and not realize they're going to inflict damage.
Yeah, I think the connectivity, like 1 + 1 = 2, doesn't register.
So,
it's just the 1 + 1. Yeah,
they don't have a concept right now of good and bad. Everything is about them. That toddlers are very not ethnocentric. They're very egocentric.
Egocentric,
and they very much the world is about them. The world is they relate to the world of like even if it's not something to do with them, it's like, well, how does that affect me? Like that
was me in
right.
college, basically. It turned into me in college.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but that's a child's right. That's their right to. That's a normal development stage, and as the parent, you need to foster and honor that.
Yeah.
And then also teach them that when we wake up in the morning and you're like sinking your heel into my nose, that's a negative thing. Like dad's, if you bloody dad's nose, that's not a good thing.
You can't. So that I do understand that at that age you can't like necessarily laugh at situations because it's going to cause connectivity.
Yeah. Like you have to understand that, like, and again, as a first time parent, and then first time parent through like having gone through parenting with COVID.
Yes.
It's, you have to start letting go of a lot of things. Like, you have this expectation about your night. Oh, I was planning on doing this. I'm planning on doing that. And then, Jagger's like,
no to that.
I don't know, throwing poop at the fucking window or something. And you're like, yeah, okay, fuck. Now we're going to do this all night. Yeah. Like it's just, you have to understand. It's like, it's no longer about you.
Oh, well, for the record, anybody watching, I don't have kids, so I sleep great at night. Oh my God. My sleep is questionably great these days.
Yeah. I wish I remember the last day I had a good sleep. I do remember that.
It was a highlight day. You wrote it in your journal. Okay.
I sort of had the suspicion too that might be my last good day of sleep. It was like the night before my wife
predicted it. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was like I was like, you watch now, Jagger's gonna come, and it's like, the next day, Jill's like, I think my water just broke.
Oh, there you go.
I was like, yep, that was my last good night of sleep.
Well, it was all about you for a while, and now it's all about family. Yeah. It's all about other people. It's all about not you, I guess. Yeah.
But yeah, but there's something really there's something very rewarding in living that way and learning that way.
Yes.
And it's certainly not for everybody. I know people that if I don't, I think it's great they don't have kids, because we need people like that in the world too. That,
Yeah.
And not saying that I'm selfless. I think I'm still selfish a lot of times, because it's hard to let, it's hard to let a 2-year-old have his tantrum and not be affected by it, or like, like my Apple i remote is the bottom of water right now. So
Totally.
and then you find out they're $100 to replace, and you're like, oh,
do I need to? Yeah, but they don't understand the ramifications of the actions that they're doing.
No,
yeah.
They have no clue. And it's not, and he thinks it's funny because I chased him to get the remote, and then it ended up. So then it's like, so then as a parent, that's like the real test right there, is how you react to that, because what they did technically was only bad in your mind.
Correct. Yes.
It's not a bad thing to put something in water. It's just what he put in the water was going to cost me money, but that has nothing to do with him, because in his world that's irrelevant.
Yeah, you can understand that angle of it if you empathize with it, but both you and I know there's a lot of parents that would not, and they get kind of rough, if you know what I mean. Not to get too dark here, but parents can certainly not have that empathetic angle of it, and take it a little bit harder than usual.
And it's harder to parent this way, like where there's not not a lot of consequences for dumping stuff in the water.
True.
But, and he also doesn't have language yet, so yeah.
Yeah, I guess he can't really say how he's feeling. That's a good point. Yeah. So being 2, sorry, that's how old he is too?
Almost 2.
Yeah. That's putting a big task on you. That's putting a big task on everybody around to manage that and understand. I get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I like being the uncle, and that way I
was an awesome uncle. It was an awesome uncle. Yeah, totally.
I don't think you're allowed to say that how awesome you were. I don't know if I'm awesome or not.
Sure. No,
when the kids get like, when the kids are like 18 or 19, they're like, you were an awesome uncle. I'm like, I kind of knew that.
Yeah. I know I was. I know for a fact I was.
Awesome. Well, I'm trying to be a good uncle to my nieces, my nephews right now, and they're Mags just turned 10 on the weekend, and she's a hoot to stream with, and all the kids are awesome, and I really attribute it to the fact that I'm a pretty awesome uncle. But
aren't you getting up at like an ungodly hour to stream with her?
Well, because of my new work schedule, I used to stream with her on Saturday afternoons, and now we're doing Saturday mornings. So I got to get up for 7 in the morning. Well, I got to get up for 6:30, but 7 in the morning for her 10 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
We're still figuring out who we're.
That makes you an awesome uncle, actually, because I wouldn't do that for my nephews or my niece.
She doesn't understand time zones yet, so as far as she's concerned, I've already gotten up for breakfast and already done my entire day by the time she starts streaming, and I'm like, hello, oh my god, yeah. But Sunday afternoons are awesome when we stream, because she's a lot of fun playing Mario Kart and raising money for charity. We do it every Sunday afternoon. So.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good, uncling.
Thanks.
Is that a word?
Oh, totally.
Uncling?
Well, we'll verb it up. That sounds good.
Uncling, yeah. Good uncling, PJ.
Thanks, dude. Thanks. I'll take it from you for the moment.
Did you know, speaking that we're on the topic of ethnomusicology, which is
I was just about to segue. Let's do it.
Music and other ethnicities, but in certain cultures, the uncles and aunts play a very pivotal role in the bringing up of a child, especially African cultures.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, where the aunts and uncles actually, that's where if I'm not mistaken, that's where the it takes a village. Because there are certain cultures. There was a study done in, I think it was within the Congo, but there's 4 months old, their children hold their heads up. That's unheard of in the Western culture.
Okay.
And it's because just the way that they parent, they have the child never leaves the mom, and the aunts and uncles have so much to do with their upbringing. But by the time that they're 1, that child is about 6 months ahead of the average Western, like North American kid.
Yeah.
In many ways, like in IQ and stuff. But then a month and a half later, they're sent off to live with someone completely different.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. But there you go.
Yeah. And no TikTok is destroying any IQs at that point.
No TikTok. Guaranteed.
Oh
No
my God.
TikTok.
Oh, I love it.
No
Well, you brought it up. Today we're talking about a really awesome subject, as a matter
Super
of fact.
awesome.
And to be honest, you and I have talked about this. Is that it's a realm that I'm very unfamiliar with, super unfamiliar with. But I know that it exists, obviously. But I'm curious to know more about what it means and how can I apply it to my life, maybe a little bit more as well, selfishly.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it in the context of the study of it. I am.
Right.
I studied African percussion and I've studied Indian percussion in Konakal.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's our title song, "Separate From You," that brought us into the show. That's based on a West African drum part. But that's about where it ends for me, other than knowing something about my former drum teacher, Kwashi, from Kenya.
Wow.
But
Wow.
I don't, the whole study of it intrigues me. And that's our guest, one of our guests, Natasha, is the one that brought it up to me and really kind of got me thinking, is that would be a really interesting topic. And I know that our guests are familiar. And of course, we're going to proceed this talk with they're not experts. They have declared themselves non-experts, but that they have definitely been familiar with, and they've applied it into music in many ways. So they're by no means proclaiming to be experts, but they know a hell of a lot more than we do.
So that's the whole premise of what we're doing here, is just to have a discussion about it and do a little bit of education on it, even if it's surface level, even if it can be deeper. Education more than anything else. So I'm stoked about it. Well, why don't we bring in Natasha first, as a matter of fact, really quick here.
Okay.
Because it's great to see Natasha before we were streaming. She certainly did a lot of drum festivals as well, and I have to admit, she was a bit of a highlight. The last drum fest that I saw was the Nanaimo Drum Festival with her, and she played a really cool percussion piece, if I remember correct. It was actually
didn't
very,
she do
very
the
cool.
brush thing with the she did the singing? I was just like blown away. That's totally a Gad thing that she just did. Like she did way better than he did.
Oh, well, let's bring in Natasha. Natasha, hey you.
Hello.
Hey, it's awesome to see you again. Given the times here, I miss you from the times that I have seen you. You're nice.
I miss you.
Oh, nice. What are you doing right now? Yeah. What are you doing right now? Where are you and what's going on in your life? What's up? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, right now I'm in Victoria on Vancouver Island here. And I've taken a little bit of a step away from my everyday music life, and I'm in the X-ray program in medical radiography at Camosun College. So I'm studying to become a X-ray technologist. Yeah.
Intense.
It's a lot.
It's much deeper than just becoming a barista. So
literally, she can see past bones and stuff.
Well, that's just it. But I also think that it takes a very specific mind. Oh my God. I think it takes a very specific mind to be able to study that, understand it, and take responsibility for that, for human health in particular.
I think it's something that music... Oh, thank you. I think it's something that music prepared me for, which is something that I didn't expect, in particular my studying at Vancouver Island University when I did my jazz studies degree. It was a lot. It was very overwhelming at times, and it was a lot of effort. And you took a lot of courses, you did a lot of studying, and then you had your own instrument to practice and try and become better at every day as well. And it's definitely helped me for this program. It's a lot of studying. It's again a lot of classes. There's a lot of different aspects of this career, but I feel a lot more prepared for it because of my previous musical studying. So thankful for that. But something a little different.
Yeah. I got told once a long time ago, humans are pattern makers and pattern seekers. And I think that once you establish good patterns when it comes to as drummers, obviously we recognize patterns, but also study habits when it comes to daily life patterns and those type of things, you're almost predisposed for a certain level of study, a certain level of dare I say, intelligence for that matter as well. So all the patterns you develop throughout your life has given you opportunities such as this. That's pretty awesome. So cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice that it comes back so quickly, just like music or anything that you practice for so long. You can kind of step away from it for a moment, but it comes back. And that's something I've noticed with this type of stuff too.
Yeah. We're at a level now of drumming that you don't need to practice. I get it. That's fine.
Never. Yeah.
No. Right, Sean? No need to practice ever again. We can get called for any gig and land the gig. Oh my God.
100%.
Okay, Natasha. Let's bring in our second guest. Natasha, did you want to introduce him? Bring him in?
Oh, sure.
You know Hans quite well. Go for it.
I do. Yeah. So our other guest here is Hans Verhoeven. He is an amazing drummer, an incredible instructor at Vancouver Island University, and also a professor there as well. And he's actually the person who introduced me into ethnomusicology when I was studying with him a few years back. So yeah, Hans Verhoeven.
Welcome, Hans.
There you go, Hans.
It's nice to be here. Thank you.
Nice, bud. Welcome. It sounds like you've had quite the impact on Natasha in particular, but do you feel that within a lot of your students? Yeah.
I don't know. I certainly hope so. My students, they're great. They teach me a lot, and they seem to be doing really well. A lot of them, are doing really different things, and they're excelling. So it's very rewarding.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, Hans, tell us a bit about. So today we're talking about ethnomusicology, which, to be full disclosure, when I was doing the post for Instagram today, that word did not flow off my tongue very well at all, and it took me like a dozen tries to get it right. Tell us a bit about what ethnomusicology is, and go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's funny because ethnomusicology is just musicology, which is the study of people making music and people relating to music and music existing in societies and cultures and civilizations. But because this Western European paradigm sort of decided that their classical music, art music, was like kind of the pinnacle of achievement in humanity, in terms of musical expression and accomplishment. So this is quite arrogant. They dubbed the study of that music to be musicology, and then other people started. And it kind of started in Eastern Europe, where you have, more of a broader influence. You have the influence of like the Balkans, which is tied to the Middle East and Turkey and Northern Africa. And that's where you get all those really interesting odd meter musics, Bulgarian music, Romanian music. And you also get more notes, right? You get microphones, and you get so then people with ears to hear and open hearts and open eyes and stuff started being like, wait a minute, what is all this music about? So they started studying that, and that became musicology, excuse me. And so if you kind of pick it apart, it's got some pretty racist colonial baggage and beginnings, and it's also kind of a reductive term. Like if you imagine like you're in the supermarket and you go to the ethnic foods aisle, where they have like salsa and like soy sauce and things like that, as if that. Do you know what I mean?
I do. Yeah.
So
compartmentalizing.
Compartmentalizing and othering and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So, however, ethnomusicology as a study has attracted, I think, people who are really like open-minded, or a lot more open-minded and curious, and I want to learn about this thing that I have no idea what's going on. I don't speak the language. A lot of ethnomusicologists end up, moving to the country so that they can immerse themselves in the culture and learn the language and so on and so forth. So there's a real attempt to learn as much as anyone can as a cultural outsider, and so that has a lot of value. And only sort of just recently, ethnomusicology has started to turn the lens back on Western European and Euro-American cultures, and started to look at, like, why, for instance, why is music so competitive in like a Western European paradigm? Like, why is there so much like self-worth attached to music, and on and on and on. I mean, you could use ethnomusicology to study like things like the objectification of women in pop music or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of value to it, even though it kind of started out as this way to separate like us from them, and it was this weird thing of like, us being like Western European classical music and them being everybody else. You know what
everything
I mean?
that's like, not 4/4 is over there.
Exactly.
Everything. And so I mean, that's,
and a lot of generalizing, I suppose, as well, right? Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah.
I'll mute. I'm more curious. Oh, wait.
Yeah, you totally can. Sorry,
No.
I also have a 19-month-old, 20-month-old, and
there you go.
She's not in a great mood, and it's bedtime, so she just wants to come down and say goodnight.
Well, cool. Yeah,
absolutely.
Family first, always, my friend.
If Jagger could come up here, he would.
Yeah. Oh, and the dog's here too. Everybody's.
It's a family affair.
It is. Love it.
I'm going to bed.
Thank you, bud.
Okay, then.
Hey.
Can you go off to sleep?
Off
you go, puppy. Sorry about that.
No, not at all. Don't apologize. It's great.
Thanks for being understanding.
Family first, always. Yeah.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it's complicated, but it's also kind of not that complicated if you just try to approach it with a very open mind, totally no presumptions, no assumptions, and a lot of humility, and just be aware of your own sort of limitations of understanding and perception, because we're all kind of trapped in our own way of thinking, which we've learned, since birth. And be like, I may never understand this, but there's still value in trying to, and it's a very big, rich, complicated world out there, and so how does music work here? How does music work there? What is the point? How do people think about music? How do people approach various elements of music? It's amazing. Yeah. So it can be very, I mean, it's just one of those, it's like, it is what you make it, kind of, you know what I mean?
You, what you said resonated with me when it came to like, and I'm thinking ground level here, is, even in grocery stores, generalizing like, Mexican food, cool, you know what I mean?
Right. Mexico is a very, very diverse place, and depending where you are, like,
absolutely. But I guess the challenge is the average person just is so conditioned that that's the aisle. Like, even now, I'm like, I eat a lot of tortillas. I'm like, there's a Mexican aisle, in case you're wondering. Sorry if I'm saying the wrong words. But there's obviously an aisle where I can find that. But I'm just so generalizing. I'm conditioned to generalize. How do you unwind that conditioning, right?
Right. That's a good question. I think it's I think it just has a lot to do with um, um, you know, seek and ye shall find, like being open and curious, and really having your ears open, and looking for me, it's all about like looking for similarities, and like I do this so much, like I can like I feel like I could kind of make like almost anything swing, because like I'm really good at like ethnocentricizing music. Like when I hear it, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, like that's actually really there are a bunch of things that are really similar to what I do, and it just fires me up, and I'm like, yeah, I can make that work, so but then of course like that's just the start. That's like the entry point. And then from there it's about um it's about learning and being curious and asking questions and being respectful and just wanting to try to treat like the music with as much respect as possible, and also the people that make the music and the people that originated the music, and just be like, wow, this is some seriously heavy stuff. I love this. Like, what is going on? What are you doing?
Yeah.
And then just being very humble, and you know, you have to fumble your way forward, obviously, like anything else, like learning another language, right? Like you just fumble your way forward, and it's fine. Everybody's kind of making mistakes, but I think if your heart is in the right place, it's okay.
It's a win. Within a group that I play, there's the bass player I play with that uses the term parroting all the time, to parrot something. It's just to repeat something that that you've heard. And it's very easy for us to learn a clave, if we're going to relate it to drumming right now. It's very easy to learn left foot clave, or just clave in general, but not understand the core of why it exists, how it is applied culturally, right? And I don't know if you know who Gary Grace.
Sure, yeah, I took a lesson with him. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. So Gary, I had the opportunity when I was at Roland to do a tour with him, and having him in the back seat of the car while I'm driving, just picking his brain, was amazing, because he's of the same mindset that you are. Absolutely, that if you're going to learn a style of music, you want to understand the culture of why it is what it is, and you don't want to parrot it. You just don't want to play it back. And I learned more in like 5 hours of driving with him than I did my entire, career of drumming. And it really made me take a step back in my drumming and go, okay, I'm just playing this because I can play it. If I play with some Latin band tonight, I could probably pull it off, no problem at all. But is it authentic? No. Zero is it authentic, right?
Right.
Does that resonate? Yeah.
Well, definitely. And I think there's a good chance it will never be authentic, but I think like what an important element that you're bringing up is, cultural appropriation. And yeah, that's a really good thing to think about, because I mean, there are like documentaries on Netflix now about this sort of thing, like The Lion Sleeps Tonight, right? That famous song. And like who actually came up with that song, and who actually recorded that song first. And then like if you think about like not to diss anybody, but like the Beatles, when they very first started out and they were touring America, and there were all those white girls screaming their heads off, they were just covering tunes by African American
totally
musicians, right?
Yeah.
But and they were just exactly like parroting it, and they were getting way more success because they're functioning in a system that is completely racist from top to bottom.
Totally.
So cultural appropriation is a really important thing to think about and be aware of, and I honestly don't know how to even begin to go about that. My experiences taking lessons with drummers and percussionists from other cultures, particularly Ghanaian drummers. Like I've had the good fortune to study a little bit with some Ghanaian master drummers, and man, they were so generous. And like the last lesson that I got, I felt like my brain was on fire. It was like I was like, this much fun should be illegal. Like I was just like, and he was so kind and generous, and it was like he would just keep giving me as much as I could take, and I don't speak the language. Languages, right? Most people from like West African countries are multilingual. But it and since that lesson, I have not gone running around giving clinics or lessons or using any of that stuff on any of my gigs, except for perhaps like the way it made me feel. And I've certainly been like listening to that stuff more, but it wasn't like that thing where you go to a really good drum teacher and they like show you this cool fill. And then you learn the fill, and then you go and you play it on your gig, and you go and play it on your gig, or they show you some cool pattern and you go and play it on your gig, and you go and play it on your gig, and people are like, oh wow, that's so great, and you get this little ego boost and everything like that. It wasn't like that. It was more like I was like, oh, clearly, like, oh my God, I could just like spend the rest of my life like doing this, like taking lessons with this guy, and it would be so great. Unfortunately, that hasn't worked out yet. But yeah, I think I don't know. Maybe it just comes down to like a personality thing. I myself am not satisfied with playing superficial shit, so I don't.
Yeah.
And when I do, it feels empty. It feels like put on. It feels like kind of a disservice to the music and the musicians and the listening audience and stuff. So
yes, I would use the word disingenuous. It feels for me in particular, right?
Yeah.
Do you? Sorry to derail that, but just Natasha in particular, do you feel like there was a pivotal moment in your playing where suddenly you wanted to dive deeper than just surface level buffoonery, I guess, because you're a lot more complex drummer than the average drummer?
Oh, thank you. I would say right at the beginning of my studying in university, I came in as the student version of the classic person in the grocery store down the ethnic aisle, just being like, I like music, and I want to play music, and that's all I care about. And I had an injury earlier on that didn't allow me to play music to the extent that I wanted to play. So in our lessons is where Hans first, started talking about this stuff. And right at that moment where I couldn't play how I wanted to play, I knew that however I did continue, I wanted to play as genuinely and as authentically as I possibly could. And I think, as Hans was saying, there's just certain people who feel that way and who don't want to step into an area where they're not maybe at the level that they should be, right? Like I would never get a call for a metal gig or like a punk rock gig and be like, yeah, that's me. I'm going to find the person that I know who is that's in their bag, right? And in the same way that I hope that if they weren't comfortable in jazz or something like that they might call me your Hans, right? So and talking about just being respectful of the music and being respectful of the artist, because a lot of this music that I'm drawn to comes from a lot of hurt and pain and anger and things that happen that I couldn't possibly understand as a white woman, living in the age that I live in, right? So I think it's just being respectful of those things and being aware of them.
would you say, this might be a bad example, but maybe we get it, is, in high school, there's bullies, there's, an immaturity that happens, but then there's this pivotal moment that happens, whether you're 25 or 50 or 60, there's this moment of maturity where you're like, oh, that younger self was just didn't have the right look at the world, or just didn't see things right. I wish I could explain things to them a little bit differently. Do you feel like, this is to both of you, do you feel like this is a maturity thing in music where suddenly you have a different type of respect, there's a different view on what you're doing, that what you were doing was disingenuous and now you want to take a different approach? Is that too... Using bully was a strong word, but it's still the immaturity at a young age where you'll take every metal gig and every pop punk gig, but now you're like, you know what? I'm going to learn something and learn it right, Oh, great.
That's a really interesting question. I think what it makes me think of is, and I'm guilty of this myself, I think there are many, many, many of us who make music and play the drums and play music in public for, I don't want to say the wrong reasons, but I kind of do.
Sure.
Music is so special. It's like one of the best things about humans. Maybe like right up there in like the top 3 or top 2. And to be playing it to like feed your ego or fill a hole or a tear that has been created through, like to like feed your ego, or to try to make people think that you are something specific. I think a lot of us go through periods of doing that, and I think we're not.
Oh, bye, Sean. Oh, sorry. It's just you and I now. There you go.
Okay.
Yep. Sorry. Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think when we're doing it that way, and it's complicated, right? Because there are some people who are like really, really good at their instrument and really, really good at their genre that they play. And you're like, holy crap, like that's brilliant in some cases. But there's still something like, I don't know. It's a tough one. Maturity, I don't know if it's maturity or if it's something else. But
it's a top shelf word, and I wanted to be sensitive when I say the word maturity, because I think we all agree that we're at no point does anybody go, I'm a better musician than you, obviously, because I know how to play a clave way better than you, metal guy.
Right.
I don't think that's the approach at all. Wow, my sarcasm was about to kick in, but no, that's not the case. But I do think that there is something to be said for diving deep into your field of study and taking it much more seriously or authentic or genuine. And we're musicians here, and sometimes I feel that people generalize themselves as, I'm just a drummer. I'm not supposed to know theory. I'm not supposed to understand notation. I'm not supposed to, dude, I'm just a metal guy. And no, I don't know. Or I'm just a, whatever. Right. So I do say this kind of with a little level of arrogance, whether it's 1%, is that I do believe that because I dove a little bit deeper in it, I do feel a little bit more mature in this field of study, than some others that play at kind of surface level. And with that comes a little bit more responsibility. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think too, it's like,
I don't know.
It's, it's difficult. I think it's difficult with technology. I think it's difficult that people can see every single drummer in the world that wants to put a 2-second clip of themselves online, and a lot of people immediately kind of compare themselves to that, right? And or if you have so and so down the street says, well, I never took one lesson ever, and I just do this and this, and look how great I am. I think people can stray from their own individual path with that, right? And I think that's a big thing too, is that each person's path and the way they go about it is so unique to themselves. And I think that's another great thing about music too, right? So I think people get lost in the amounts of information that is out there for them all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, just because we have a lot of information doesn't mean it's a lot of good information. Wow. There's just a lot of information.
Yeah.
Yes.
And maybe that's all that's needed a lot of the time. And I guess if I'm going to circle it back to the beginning, is how do we inspire people to do that little deeper, slightly deeper dive, right? And so I would take it down to Natasha, that while you were studying with Hans, were there any key pivotal moments that were aha moments for you that made you recognize that this is deeper than I believed ahead of time?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. Once you start kind of talking about where music comes from, and where...
Bye, Sean.
He's gone again.
It's okay.
Where music comes from, and I mean, even where certain musicians or a certain song is influenced by. Once you go down that rabbit hole, it's like you kind of can't stop, because you start noticing all the different connections to things. And studying jazz is I think a great first step into that, because that's really how jazz was created. And maybe probably too simple of terms, absolutely too simple of terms. You have African rhythms and European music, and you start seeing those connections, and it starts kind of getting exciting when you hear that. And then Sean, you're talking about your studies of West African and Indian tabla and stuff, and like hearing all these different meters, and I think, like I said, once you start, you can't stop. It's just kind of exciting, and again, I think for me, it just goes back to that being genuine and not wanting just to start doing something or start talking about something and not go that little bit further with it. And yeah, that started in school with me. It started with jazz, and luckily those kind of courses and stuff are provided for you when you're doing that type of degree of your history and your anthro and your ethno and all that kind of stuff. So.
You've chosen to do that for sure, but not to be the negative side of it, but it's very easy to say I don't care. It's very easy to say the gig is the gig. I learned my clave. I can play any gig in the world now. I don't need to know anything more. I'm totally good. I can play I learned how to swing. I can play in any swing band in the world. Who's this Buddy Rich guy, And what is the curiosity? What is the reason? Is it because I visited Spain? Is it because I went to Cuba and I actually experienced the culture? Is it because I know I have a friend who is from Cuba, and every time I'm at his place, there's always Cuban music on, and I'm like, what is going on here? I love this music. Like, you have to get on the curiosity train. You can't be told to get on the curiosity train, if that makes sense,
That makes complete sense. This is not something that can be forced,
right.
And I think like it doesn't really matter where the inspiration or the fire comes from, how that fire gets lit. I don't think it really matters. I think it's as long as it gets lit, that's the important thing. And I think that it also doesn't it doesn't matter that there are a bunch of people who don't experience that spark, because I think what we're maybe talking about is like the people that hear it, they go, wait a minute, there's something there, and then they they go and what is that? What is that? What is that? And they keep doing that. That's just the cream rising to the top. And there are a whole bunch of like people that are not interested and not curious and because maybe they just don't hear it or they haven't heard it yet, that's fine. But I think like the value in going deeper and doing this research, whatever it is, into whatever it is, the value of doing that is that it comes out in our playing. And if we can nurture that and develop that, it comes out so strong that people who don't know anything about music go, holy shit. They feel it and they go, this is different, this is special, this is something more than just your average. And the more people that there are that are doing that, the better off we're all going to be, because it's going to raise everybody's level, but without saying, without constricting anyone. You know what I mean? You do your thing, I'll do my thing. Natasha, you do your thing, and we'll all just do our own thing, and people will go, holy shit. And further to technology, that's the thing that's going to save us from being replaced by these ever more complex, artificial intelligence drummers and stuff, right? Like we've all already been like eviscerated by the drum machines and the programming and like all this ridiculous algorithmic bullshit.
Yeah.
And it just means that like we have to work harder to develop, our ability to play like a pocket and put some stuff in there that's like, holy shit, a computer could never be programmed to do that. They try, right? They try to break down Jeff Porcaro's hi-hat rhythms and stuff using fractals and all this crap. And you're like, dude, you're never gonna get it. Like, and that's what's so beautiful about it. And that's what's so beautiful about tabla drumming and tar drumming and kete drumming from, and on and on, buleria from Spain, and like, man, I just go on and on and on and on, and it's like everywhere you look, holy shit, humans are like excelling at drumming and rhythm. And what is also super, super interesting, and I mean, this is like a very basic example, but I find it very encouraging. It's all way more connected and similar than it is different. Like, think about it.
Yeah.
Everybody plays flams.
Yep.
Yeah.
Even if they don't call them flams, like bra-ba-da. It just is this beautiful fat. It sounds so great. It feels so good. When you play a flam on whatever percussion instrument, your legs, whatever, it sounds. And so everybody plays flams in every culture. It's not a rudiment.
Yeah.
It's just that in Switzerland and France they call it the flam.
Yeah.
It's like universal. So like you could get, airdropped from a helicopter in like the mountains of like Papua New Guinea, and there could be like a festival or something going on where there's music, and you would be hearing people playing flams, and you could be like, oh, I can get with this.
I get that.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, so that's. Like,
I always treat flams like whenever I see a guitarist use their pinky, I know that they're a good guitarist. I don't know why, but if they manage to play a chord and have their pinky involved, they must be a good guitar player. And I feel that way about drummers. Whenever there's a flam, I'm like, he knows what he's doing for some reason. He's one step above kind of where it is. Can I pose a question here for a second? Just on the heels of what you were talking about. We were talking about drum machines, but agree or disagree or discuss that programming an 808 or a really good drum machine in hip hop culture would be considered like you really have to learn how to program that drum machine along those lines. Does that resonate a tiny bit? Like learning how to really program a drum machine with certain styles of music?
I think, the actual programming
electronic,
itself,
like EDM, like techno, like
I think the programming itself maybe would be less the art form as opposed to say if you listen to what, say, Dre talks about, Dr. Dre, or I spent quite a bit of time with Zorro, and so before Zorro was Zorro, his name is Daniel, and Daniel.
Don't tell us what his real name is. He ruined everything. You ruined it.
Before he was
like
a drummer,
he
was a DJ in kind of the Compton, and he grew up in those areas, and for him, DJing was an escape from kind of the life he was around. And for him, that whole vibe of the hip hop culture was a lot of those kids didn't have access to things other than someone had a beatbox, someone had an 808, and it was just like, well, that's all we have access to. So let's just. So I think in that's what kind of a way, it became its own entity. I think the programming itself is not necessarily. I mean, programming was invented before the war, so, but the use of it and how it was used, and again, like Hans has mentioned and Natasha's mentioned, it's super important music to respect the message and what that music was used for. A lot of that music, especially in South Central Los Angeles, was coping with violence, coping with marginalization, coping with poverty, coping with, Zorro told me, he's like, I only knew one kid with a dad. That wasn't normal to have a dad. And you think about living your life from that place, and you go like, oh my God, right? Like now being a father, and I'm sure you can relate as well, Hans. It's like it's a pretty delicate thing to be taking, and we mentioned when I mentioned the African drumming, and it's very interesting. My first exposure to learning kind of how stupid I was in music actually was me and the principal timpanist from the Thunder Bay Symphony Orchestra took these African drumming lessons with Kwashi, who was originally from Kenya and then moved to Nigeria. And he was teaching us, and we thought we were really good, and we were like the only drummers in the class. And he sort of pulled us aside one day, and so we sort of thought, oh, he's going to get us to help coach other people. And he said, if you guys could talk less about mathematics, like 1 and 2, he's like, that's not what this is. He goes, this is becoming very frustrating for me. He says, this is not math class. And both Andre and I were like, oh, wow. Okay. We totally disrespected his methods, because everything Kwashi teaches is everything he's taught us was 1,000 years old or more. It's handed down. It's not written down. It's like gamala, taki, taki, gamala. Same as tabla music is konakol. It's all, it's rhythmic. It's rhythm. It's stories. And he was just like, he kept, because we sit there with our little notepads writing down like one like gamala. So that's a triplet. And he's like, no, it's music.
You feel it.
Yeah. Just call it music. And so both of us, like both Andre and I, just left there like, oh God, like we're the biggest idiots in the world. And then once we we started respecting it, and then you really start to feel, you let go and you go, right, this is music. It doesn't fucking matter about perfection or ego, or like Kwashi was showing us a video of a drum circle with a fire, and this was in Nairobi, I think. And they started playing, and this fire was just burning in the middle of their circle, and no one was going near the fire. And when they started really grooving, and like ahache players and djembe and June, and all of a sudden, like this fire just started like moving, and it was crazy. Like this was not anything that anyone had doctored. And he was showing this to illustrate, like, this is music living. This is my proof that it lives, because this fire is not doing that prior to them playing music. It's just not. And they're not standing close enough that they're creating like wind. It's just rhythm. And this fire just starts doing this crazy dance, and like it starts getting high, but like high kind of, it reminded me, PJ, of like your tattoo of like a waveform. It would go up and come down, it would go up and then it would come down. And it just like, that was to me the most humbling lesson aside from living in China for a year, about, you don't know shit.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. And you saying like that thing about living in China made me think like I lived in Taiwan for almost a year, and I was like, and I hooked up with this great American piano player. He was awesome, and he spoke the language and stuff, and he's still there. And I was getting ready to go, and he goes, "So, like we were in like a hot spring because they're just everywhere there." And he goes, "So, what did you learn?" And I said, "I learned that I am not as open-minded as I thought I was." And he laughed, and he was like, "Good." So I mean, yeah, and just to like circle back to your original question about the computers and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about computers. I'm terrible with them. I'm allergic to them. I experience digi-rage, like when the little thing starts spinning, I want to get my a rock and just.
You're on one right now. Don't get scared.
Yeah. I know. But there was a really interesting thing that Sean said that made me think about it made me think about the African diaspora, in North and South America, and like that instrument, the cajon, right? Where that comes from is like slave population in Peru. They started playing they were forced to unload and load the ships, right, in the ports. And they'd end up with all these empty wooden packing crates. So they started playing on the packing crates, and that is the ancestor of the cajon. And that instrument, developed in Peru, and then it went back to Spain, and then you've got the flamenco cajon, and you've got the Peruvian cajon without the snares, right?
Yeah.
And it just is like, the people who are so strongly connected to music and orientated for music and just wired for music will figure out how to make amazing music on anything, being it an empty wooden box, a tomato can, some sort of crappy drum machine technology. So it's like it's transcendent. And I think like that like the hip hop stuff, and then some of the EDM stuff. I mean, I can't comment on any of that, but like there are some people that like it's amazing. Like they take this like clunky binary technology and they like, oh no, I can make this work, and it just comes right back to the source, and you just go like, well, there it is, and so it doesn't really matter, right? And as long as like I think like we're sort of appreciating and understanding and seeing like, holy shit, like there are people out there who are so musical and just so they have just music like just pouring out of them and rhythm just pouring out of them. They can make amazing music on anything. With anything. And I think that's the real focus for me.
I was kind of scratching the surface on it, but I guess I what I'm curious about is when it comes to ethnomusicology in particular, the definition thereof, and whether it's vague or not, does it apply specifically to a culture of human, and sorry if I'm using my vocabulary wrong, a culture of human, or being authentic to the culture of the music? And I say that because certainly I've got a lot of friends who do techno, and they're, I don't want to say snobs, but they're very much like, the bass drum needs to be EQ'd at a very specific thing for it to be authentically techno. If you don't EQ it that way, then it's kind of EDM, or it's drum and bass, or like there is authenticity and genuineness to electronic music, hip hop, Latin, or I'd say Latin generally. But sorry, long story short, does ethnomusicology apply to the people or the style of music, genuine nature? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's more the study of the people and the culture.
Good.
The music is like, I think in ethnomusicology, and that's what's kind of nice about it, because you don't have to be a wicked musician on any particular instrument.
Oh, yeah.
So, and you can still get into ethnomusicology. Like, it doesn't, like ethnomusicology has produced multiple forms of like notating music and rhythm, like that have nothing to do with Western European notation.
Right.
And so I think it's about studying the music as a facet of a people,
the byproduct
of a culture.
Yeah.
Not a byproduct, like an integral part of, but like checking out how the music functions and lives and what it means to the people in the context of their lives. Like, do you know what I mean? And that's what's so valuable about it, in terms of like turning the lens back on ourselves finally, and to be like, because I mean, if you think about it, the way we do music as Euro Americans is kind of fucked up in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when I was like a teenager, I was like, I was like, why is it that like nobody, and I grew up like very rural BC, so it was very monoculture, monochrome, like this particular discussion.
Yep.
but I was like, you know, how come nobody dances until they've had like 4 or 5 beers in them? You know, it's
good point.
Like just anything like that. It's like, it's interesting, and it's there's a lot of egoism involved, and I think, and Natasha, you may have noticed this, I don't know, I'd be interested to hear what you think, but there's a huge amount of like macho male energy in the North American drum set playing from the sort of Caucasian contingent, and that's, I have not seen that as being like a positive thing very much myself, but I'd be interested to know, like, especially Natasha, what you think about that, or if you know, if you have anything to say about that.
Yeah.
Oh, do I?
Here we go. It's a great question. Great question. Yes. Yeah.
Been waiting all night. No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, a really interesting part of studying ethnomusicology for me is the way that status is linked to instruments and to music, and who's allowed to play certain instruments and who isn't, and you know, there's like really interesting kind of juxtaposition of like, you know, the peasant you know, playing the trumpet or like kettle drums for, you know, the royal leader coming in, and although this is like this instrument that represents this royalty and this, you know, person we should all bow down to, well, you know, this lower class, you know, person is the only one that can play it, you know. So it's kind of these like interesting parallels there. And so another one is like, you know, women in music. Women, you couldn't play drums. You had to play piano or maybe flute, maybe a violin, something little that you could hold and you could stand perfectly in your dress and not get messy and not be, you know, unfeminine, and, or something like that. And I think that those kind of ideas, whether it's conscious or not, are still kind of in our culture, right? I mean, and it's almost gone a different way. Whereas if you are a woman in music and you choose to have maybe more of a masculine trait, you know, that's not really seen as a a celebrated quality when it comes to selling someone's music or selling someone as an artist, right? That's when countless women have come forward and said, well, you know, they told me I had to wear less, or I had to look this way, or I had to do this or that to be a part of this machine. But when it comes down to drumming in particular in music, yeah, it very much is kind of a male dominated world. And there still is that kind of idea of, you know, you play good for a woman, you know, or you're celebrated as a musician because you're a woman. Right. You're not just a drummer, right? And I know that, you know, and I can't tell you, I mean, I do sing often now, but I can't tell you how many times I'd walk in and, you know, and people are trying to be nice, but it's like, oh, the vocalist is here, you know, and I'm carrying my drums on my back being like, yeah, I'm just carrying the drum kit in. I'm singing tonight, like, you know, so, and yeah, it's not coming in a malicious way from people, but it's still in our culture that, you know, women don't play these instruments, they play this and this. And so when you walk in a room, that's kind of what is expected of you.
Yeah, I think back, all of that's hitting me really hard right now, and mostly because as a male, I'm sitting here talking and hadn't considered that part of this conversation. So thank you. So yes, that's why that's hitting me hard. And what you said resonated hard with me in regards to that males have been celebrated, whether it's Beethoven, Liszt, like predominantly male musicians have been in the spotlight just in the past, but even up until TikTok, up until Instagram, marketing, when it comes to major record labels, have always marketed women very different than the males, right? So I don't want to use the word blame, but I'm totally going to. I do blame big business for making that divide. And so on the shoulders of that, I think about the fact that in a world where we do have TikTok, in a world we have Instagram, where we have social media, women now have opportunity to be entrepreneurs for themselves and market themselves however the hell they want and build community and do whatever they want. It way overdue that should have even been happening. But does that resonate with you, that it's now kind of an opportunity and it's being celebrated now? I don't know. I don't even know the right vocabulary to use. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a huge positive, and yeah, I'm a huge fan of TikTok and all these social media platforms because it allows the musician their own voice a lot of the time before they're told what they have to do. And maybe, you know, that's not everyone's experience. You know, I think I'm coming from it from like a cynical standpoint, but yeah, it's again maybe genuine, right? No one's kind of told them how to act or how to sing or what to do at that point. Yeah. At the same time, you know, there's some women who celebrate that kind of more feminine or like sexual side, you know, and it's kind of part of every minority culture or minority group, I should say, that is brought down and judged and you know, a lot of the time you want to take that back, and women are doing that, and that should be celebrated. But then in the face of that, then there's the other side going, well, you know, that's not okay, you're setting us back, you know. And it's kind of this thing of like, there's no winning, right? You're either you're doomed if you do, you know, like it's difficult. And then, you know, there's musicians that are speaking of that right now. Like, I'm a big fan of Billie Eilish. She's, you know, like this young girl that came up when she was like 16, 17, and she chose to, you know, dress very like boxy and not listen to those comments of having to sexualize herself. And, you know, and she speaks about that. Some people praised her for that, and some people called her a prude for that. And then, you know, the second that she did this magazine shoot where she's wearing lingerie, then, you know, she'd sold her soul, and, you know, everyone hated her, you know. So it's difficult. And I know that women aren't the only people that deal with that, but it's still a very common thing. And I think it's something that definitely, I think it's hard for people to deal with that. You have to think about every move that you make and how it's going to be viewed.
I find that.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
Sorry, Paul.
No.
I just, as Natasha's saying that, and as someone who I work with my wife, who's also a musician and far more talented, by the way. But if she were to say dance around, flaunting her goodies, and again, like you said, Natasha, it's women are damned if they do, damned if they don't. Whereas, so Jill and I were in Seattle. This was pre-pandemic, and we went to see Jessie J, which we both just think she's amazing. And there was two opening acts, and the first was a girl who was playing piano, and she was awesome. And she wasn't dressed scantily, but she was dressed sort of like kind of that Marilyn Monroe picture in the background. It was like a little revealing, but it wasn't I wouldn't say it was scandalous. And it was you could hear from the crowd. It was a mixed crowd, mixed ages, and especially a lot of mixed ethnicities. As Jessie J, she does tend to draw those types of audiences. And so there was a lot of back and forth. Well, no, she looks really good. And, oh no, she looks like this. And then the guy that came out as her actual warm up came out in a half tuxedo, but then he rips the tuxedo thing off. And I mean, he's cut. I mean, I'm just I'm sitting there going, yeah, oh, well, my belly doesn't look like that, but
you look good, Sean.
It was it was not, there was no question there. It was so that, well, that's not sexual. There wasn't even a question whether that was sexual or not. It's almost it's girls can't do that, but guys, it's it don't even question me because it doesn't matter because this is what I'm doing. I mean, David Lee Roth ran around in assless chaps for his whole fucking career.
Yeah.
Lady Gaga did that once, and she's coined a fucking, harlot. And you know what I mean? I think as men, and I know I said this to you, Natasha, when we first talked about having this, is that just because I recognize there's a problem doesn't mean there hasn't been a problem. It's just men are just fucking stupid that it's been going on this long, and we just don't recognize it. And and that's, again, what I said to my wife, it's hard sometimes because the moment you realize there's a problem and you go, well, just because I've realized there's a problem, that doesn't necessarily mean it's just been realized. It's been realized for years. But as I think as women, that's probably another special, even ethnomusicology section, is that what women have had to probably, and I can only imagine because I've not lived as a woman or experienced it, is yeah, you don't get the opportunity to just be what you want. I mean, when was David Lee Roth ever questioned about his outfits? Never. No. By anybody.
Marketing,
you know. Whereas women constantly get questioned about what they're wearing. The nip slip of the famous nip slip of so what? It's
Jackson,
a fucking, you know what I mean? It's interesting, and as we're talking, and I wasn't, again, I didn't want to pollute my mind with what I perceived ethnomusicology to be about. But what I'm just really starting to understand is that it can, buyer beware. It can be really humbling to get into it and go, oh, wow, look at my biases. Holy shit.
Exactly. Like I wanted to say, while everything you were saying, Sean, towards the end there was I just wanted to point out, this conversation that we've been having, since Natasha started speaking at length about this is the value of ethnomusicology. And also something to really which is very encouraging and very optimistic. And this comes from Wade Davis, who's an ethnobotanist, which is like ethnomusicology, but instead of music, it's plants. Okay. So, but he says, our society, if you wanted to sort of sum it up, extreme would be a good word, right? Yeah. I mean, we're were pretty extreme. Like there's some pretty serious stuff going on. But if you start studying all these other cultures, or maybe just one other culture, you start to see like, holy shit, the way we do things is not the only way.
Yeah,
we're not trapped. We're not doomed. Like we can change our thinking.
Yeah.
And that's the value of ethnomusicology, is like just this conversation of being like that thing where you go, oh my God.
Yes. Yeah.
and your brain just goes and you get more open. And then to apply it back to the drums, I mean, holy shit, right? If you're really open and you're like listening, and you've been listening and studying all this stuff, and then you go to take a solo or play some groove, and they've like come up with a groove for the song. Man, oh man, it's like it's so exciting. It's such an adventure. It's so rich. Like you just like that beautiful thing of like mixing things together and not quite knowing how they're going to turn out, and then being so surprised and like delighted, but it's like, oh my God, I've never played that before.
That's original. Yeah.
That's the juice, right? That's the thing that keeps me coming back.
I feel like unless you know that there's something wrong, unless you're hearing the knock on the engine, then you're not going to have the engine looked at. You know what I mean? You're just going to assume it's status quo, it's still fine. But you don't know that there's something wrong until conversations such as this, or, you're reminded in one way or another that we need to refocus. If you play a certain style of music that maybe is, do I say genderless? If you know what I mean? Like I study a lot of improvisational music. And so within at least the culture over the past decade, for me in particular, every musician, every ensemble that I've played with is, I'm not looking at it as male or female. I'm just literally looking at the instrument. I'm looking at the people in the room. I don't feel like, while you guys were talking, I was thinking to myself, I wonder, is improvisational very male or female dominated? And at least within my circles, no. It's like both genders are celebrated highly. And if that's all I knew, then I wouldn't think there's a problem at all. Everything's great, isn't it?
Right.
You know what I mean? Why are you telling me that I had no idea that this issue was happening, because I don't listen to rock, or I don't listen to marketed music, or I don't listen to hip hop, or I don't, so until we had these conversations are spotlit, people just don't know what to look for. They're in their own worlds. Right.
And I think now that we've talked about it, and I see, to me, even just the importance. And what I'm even just picking up, and I was going to mention this earlier about, say, Natasha's performance at the drum fest, and I mean, in every drum fest, it's always the same. It's just this fucking wank fest of like how many notes this guy can play or that guy can. And when I saw Natasha's performance, and I've seen at other drum fests outside of, say, Canada, and what Natasha's performance that struck me was something Steve Gadd did, and just only because it was struck me as like that's what he did, was he played the snare drum and he sang. And I just, to me, when I saw Natasha doing that, I just thought, like, that just takes balls, period, because I think, or ovaries in the case whoever the gender is, but in that, I'm under sort of my own ethnomusicology moment here, is like, as Western drummers, we're one of the only drummer sects that doesn't sing while we play. Like, African players sing, Latin players sing, Indian tabla players, they sing, they do conical, they do, like, there are very few drummers outside of North America that don't sing while they play.
Just so you know, I was in a Queen tribute and I sang "I'm in Love with My Car" with the Roger Taylor song. I sang that, by the way, just so you know.
Yeah, but I mean, as an
part.
Yeah, so can I jump in there, Sean?
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think you just brought up a hugely that's like a treasure spot.
Gold nugget. Spot.
Yeah. So like the drum set is a North American instrument, right? It's an African American invention.
Yep.
So if we start studying the music of other cultures, we're studying, and we're drummers, we're percussionists, we're listening to percussion ensembles, percussion sections, where it's like one person putting all their energy and emotion and intensity and focus and concentration into one instrument being played, maybe with just like holding the instrument and then playing it with a beater, or maybe two hands or whatever, right? So then if you start trying to do your best to play those rhythms on the drum set, adapt them to the drum set, like there are all those great books out there, West African rhythms for the drum set, Brazilian rhythms for the drum set, Cuban rhythms for the drum set, so on and so forth. And, you know, those are great starting places. Yeah. But now, like when drum set players talk about playing polyrhythms, they're not really playing polyrhythms. It's like this one's playing all the eighth notes and this one's playing some of the eighth notes. Sure. But like when you're dealing with like adapting a percussion ensemble's music to the drum set, one person might be playing something in a binary subdivision while another person is playing something in a ternary subdivision, right? Yeah. So just that spread over 4 limbs is fucking amazing in terms of like the possibilities and what it does for your brain and your abilities and skills on the instrument. But then you gotta sing. And I've told this to my students. I told this to Natasha. I kind of realized like, holy shit, the voice, the mouth is the 5th limb of independence.
Way to go.
Like that, you know, if you really wanted to explore it, you know, like integrating like J. Dilla concepts and stuff, you could be singing in a quintuplet subdivision. This one could be in a binary. This could be in a ternary. This could be in a, you know what I mean? Like I feel like as drum set players, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of the possibilities.
Yeah. I always found
what
that...
you said. Oh, sorry. I just want to interject there really quick. Is that what you said resonated hard? If you're familiar with improvisational music in particular, is that every piece around you will change from, you know, orchestration to orchestration, but everything around you is a separate instrument. You're not playing beats. You're not playing grooves. You're rarely playing beats. You're rarely playing grooves, but you're playing as an ensemble. You're playing with frequency. You're playing with rhythms. You're listening to everybody around you when it comes to dynamics. And some of the best opportunities is, like you said, when people start integrating their voice. Every musician starts integrating their voice into it. It kind of pops out of nowhere, and it's a frequency. It sets a tone that everybody just kind of finds in the moment. Yeah. And it's hard. It's not about pulses with improvisation of music as much as it is about dynamics and about recognizing spaces and playing as little as possible until you're featured. Like there's some rules to it, but it's every sorry to circle it back, is that every instrument I studied individually. I would just rehearse with just a hi-hat, top cymbal for the longest time. What type of frequencies can I pull out of this? With what implements? Whether I've got a bow, like a violin bow, or I've got knitting needles. Well, I've got, like, there's lots of different tonalities I can pull out of everything around me. And it was just a matter of spending time with every component, even down to the cymbal stand. What type of sounds can I make out of just the cymbal stand? Right? That resonates with me
too. When you, like when you were saying, Hans, with trying, even when I did teach, and I don't know why, but I never saw the point of teaching a student to play cross-handed. If it's a beginner, that person doesn't know they can't play the open-handed style because they don't know how to play the drums anyway. So that's how I would teach. And I was like, I don't want to give you a handicap. Like, I wouldn't teach you to play the piano like this. So let's just do this, right? But also, too, I found it really difficult looking in Western music for samples of how do I integrate voice into their lesson. And I actually had to come up, because I had actually it was a young kid like 11 years old, and he asked me, because we were talking about Western notation, and that was a big thing for me. And and this was having studied some African percussion, was I realized that this was this very small scope of music, that our Western notation only lives within our minds. It doesn't live within many African musicians' minds. It doesn't, in many cultures, it's non-existent. But, and he said to me, so what is a half note and what is a whole note? He's like, so, and I was like, right. Because he was like, I don't see, like, he didn't see the point of playing one. And I'm like, I guess technically, yeah. Like, I mean, a kick drum technically could be a half note if it's still sustaining, but you're not really playing the sustain. You don't have to have the patience to let the note sustain for 2 bars, or sorry, 2 notes. So it was actually a book I picked up on the conducting, and I said, okay, let's play your groove. But there's a line in the conducting thing where they have a singing line over their conducting course. And I said, I want you to sing just with the half notes over top of your groove. And he was game for it. And later on, when I tried doing it, I mean, I failed miserably. But going back to my point was, the scope of what my world is or was at that point as a drum teacher was, we don't really use the voice. So I proved to him that I wasn't prepared when he asked me, well, what's the point of these notes? And he was, he's a very talkative kid, and he liked to use his voice. So I was really ill prepared to even impress upon him how to begin to learn his 5th instrument. And I think in a lot of ways, I mean, I failed him because I didn't beyond that. I don't know. We didn't really have much that we could do. I was like, I don't really know, because at the time I didn't really sing either. So I was like, I've already sort of fucked you up for life. So sorry about that.
Here's your money back.
Yeah. Here's your money back.
That's the difficult thing about our culture is, not everyone sings, right? And there are many where, I think someone touched upon this earlier, but there's so many where music isn't there's an artist on a stage and everyone sits there very politely and claps at the end of the song, right? It's a group thing, or it's a storytelling aspect, or it's a prayer, or it's something that everyone can be involved in. And it's not who is the greatest singer. This is a part of our day-to-day life, or this is how we get through this task that we're doing, or this is how we celebrate in our church, in gospel. So I think that's the first hurdle for a lot of us here, is that, well, I'm not a good singer, so I can't sing, right? And that's not really what it's about. Everyone can sing, maybe you just can't sing like that person next to you, but everyone can sing, and everyone should sing, right? So I think that's the first part is, again, what Hans is saying, the ego of it, right? You have to get past that part first, and then you can kind of get into that aspect of it.
Do we, in regards to other cultures, and my unintelligence is saying that, if that's even a word, is saying that a lot of cultures wouldn't even notate what they're doing, right? So it's only within Western culture that we want to reason it somehow. We want to put it on paper. We want to grid it. We want to, machine it somehow to understand it. And once you do that, once you transfer what you heard to a notated piece of paper, it kind of loses intention. It loses meaning, because how you apply it is very different than how it's written. Does that make sense? Does that resonate? Yeah.
Sometimes you can't write it in European notation.
Correct.
That's
true.
Elvin Jones. Try writing out so many, like transcribing Elvin Jones solos. You're gonna come to this part where you have to like start making notes. And like
refer to YouTube video.
Yeah, exactly. and like maybe get some colors out and stuff. You know what I mean? So and he's so beautiful that way, because he can go there, and then he'll come back, and then he'll go away, and then he'll go.
Yeah.
Just like, and it just is what it is. I mean, yeah. However, notated music and notated language, right? Writing, whether it's music or text, they both kind of function as like, well, I don't know, writing can go pretty darn high, right? Like the authors that are out there, the writers that are out there, it's amazing. But maybe kind of with both, if it's done really well in the right hands, the reading of it sparks all this other stuff that the listener or the reader, if you're reading a really good book, or if you're a really good musician, like some classical musicians are, right? They're like, I have so much, like, there's so many things I can interpret and so much I can add to this. And like, if you're not a classical person, you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, you live in such a rigid world. And they're like, no, and we just don't get it. But there is that space and stuff. But I guess like what I'm talking about is like, again, that thing of transcending. Like it's not the notation is a means to an end. And it's like there are cultures that like, we don't even need we can just go straight there. We can just jump over that whole thing. And we're, as Euro Americans, we're all like, where's one?
Yes.
And they're like, no.
There is no one.
You're not thinking about it the right way. And,
I think about it like everybody can do, like if I were to put Shakespeare up on the screen, all four of us would have different interpretations of how to read that Shakespeare out and perform that Shakespeare. But somebody who is deep in that style of performing is going to perform the hell out of that, and there's going to be top tier, and there's going to be a respect level because they've done the research. And that's why you get like Broadway level people performing Shakespeare and not this guy that's trying to be radio DJ guy trying to be Shakespeare. Maybe there's a market for that, but that's a whole other situation. But Sean, okay.
I was just gonna say your iambic pentameter is pretty good, though.
My what? Sorry,
I just learned a big word the other day. I thought I'd throw it. It's a Shakespearean word.
Oh,
iambic pentameter. It's the way that the Shakespearean language is spoken.
Oh, totally.
It's the rhythm of Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I love it.
Iambic pentameter refers to rhythm. That's what it actually is. So there's ethnomusicology for you again.
Oh, I love it. So perfect. That does circle it right back. Is that learning those pacing, learning that language, learning that that meter is revered in that style. But as you said, I could just read Shakespeare and maybe get away with it. I would do children's birthday parties, no problem at all, and nobody would notice a difference. But I'm not going to be on Broadway anytime soon, right? Just based on the culture of it. So sorry, to circle back, is that if I just had a recording of some Cuban performance and I had a notation and I decided to notate it out, the four of us could perform those very differently. We've all looked at that music. We would perform it all very, very differently, different feel, different approach, different situation.
Yeah, without having listened to that
Correct.
music,
That's
the notation isn't going to do anything for you.
You got it. Yeah, that's what I mean, actually. Yeah. So I think to circle it all the way back is how do we get inspired to? I think we've already answered it to an extent. Is how do we just kind of bypass the music for a second? I get the notation. I see that there's a clave here, but let me go to Cuba and actually hear this in person, or let me talk to somebody, or let me go down a rabbit hole of great musicians that do it well and understand it. And now I can read that notation authentically, with new eyes.
And I think in the case of our Euro notation, I think like music without context it's never really useful. To me, music always requires context. Like when you talk about, a good example of notation would be a friend of mine who is Anishinaabe Nation drummer, and he tried to show me one time some of his nation's rhythms, which compared to Haida or New Hawk are totally different. And I just wasn't getting it. And he said, well, but it's not your story to tell, so you shouldn't get it. Like, there's no context for you. You don't know the stories. You don't know the dance and how the dance relates to the story and how the language relates to the dance that relates. You know what I mean? Like, and he said, all you want to talk about is 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, he goes, well, let me tell you, motherfucker, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So he's like, the context of what Neil had was not like, I wasn't listening with context. I was listening with my context, which didn't work. It's like putting a schematic over something that's not going to fit. It's like, well, you're not going to make any sense out of it. And until Neil would explain to me what some of the stories meant, and then what some of the moves meant, and then when we did the Victoria Drum Fest the year prior to the pandemic, we had it at the Songhees the Songhees Wellness Center, and the Songhees dancers came out and they did a ceremonial, like a welcoming song, and they explained as they were doing it the components to it. So then it gave the audience context.
I love
and
that part. Yeah.
You sort of understood it at such a way deeper level than everything to me felt more musical than it did if I didn't know. And again, I think the same can be said even Beethoven. I always think about La Vie en Rose, and it's how sad that song is. It's like not a beautiful song. It's really sad song. And when you have the context, then it hits you like it should hit you. It's like prolific or sad, or like circling back to Daniel, like Zorro, in the context of, say, what some of these guys in say hip hop did. You think about like the world they lived in, and how lonely that must have been, that it took, that was their only escape, and just how grateful they must have felt to have an escape, even because there was no escaping it.
Yeah.
Right. And whereas I grew up with a father, the worst was my dad was a firefighter, and it was sometimes scary when he didn't come home at 5. But beyond that, I didn't have a context of what it was like Daniel, when we talked at great length about that. And man, like, I mean, it's just a world I don't understand because I didn't live it, and I'll never understand it. Like, there's no way for me to understand it. Just the same as there's no way for me to understand the challenges that Natasha would have faced having started playing the drums or trying to break into the Nanaimo scene, because I probably wouldn't have faced those challenges in the same way, right? Like, if we were equally as competent drummers, in many ways, the Western culture has always favored what looks like this is better than that, but we don't know why. It's just always the way it's been done.
Yeah. Is it a multicultural, like where you're raised, how you're raised to be curious about other cultures? If you grew up in a small little town in the middle of Alberta, it's very different than growing up in Toronto and then over to Vancouver. Like, I've had very different cultural experiences and compared to others. So my curiosity is a little bit higher, right?
Yeah. I wonder too if, like, it's not enough to just have, like, again, my friend throughout high school is his dad and mom were from Trinidad, and like their house on Friday, Saturdays was like the place to be, because everyone they had calypso music and sing-alongs, and like my parents, no offense to them, when we all sat around and watched TV or like played a board game, and it was like his parents were like up till 4 o'clock in the morning, calypso and like food but again,
my Scottish parents are boring.
but again, then you go say again, in my experience living in China, and my experience living in China is very narrow again, because I only lived in Changsha. I only lived in the Hunan province, and I only lived in that big city. China's so diverse in as far as like even the language I learned, I'm told I have a Han accent, but I wouldn't say I totally understand the Chinese culture because I understand that sect of it. I have like a small periscope for that period in that city. And even like when we were there, we were told by people who were from Beijing, when we talked, they said, "Oh, you have a pretty good Han accent." And I said, what's Han? That's this local accent. And then, but they said, but the people here are very backwoods and they're very narrow-minded. They're not very well worldly. So even like from the context of another Asian person from China, they felt where I lived, the people there were backwoods. And then you go like, God almighty, like, I mean, this is my first time in China. Hell, I feel pretty cultural right now. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's also context. Like someone from Beijing or Shanghai living in, then they come visit Changsha, which is not a real, worldly hub. And you sort of start to see how maybe someone who's living there isn't culturally aware either, because they're just living where they live. And for a lot of them, definitely they can't afford to go anywhere else. That's where they live for the rest of their lives. But I think the curiosity is the biggest one, is to again, like Hans was saying, is to have the knowledge to know maybe I should look outside of this box. Maybe there's something there. Like, chances are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. To all of that. Great. Well, sorry, I'm at a loss for words. That was good. With respect to time, I kind of wanted to wind her down here a tiny bit. I don't even know where to go with this. Wow. I've learned that I know nothing, and I'm really excited to learn that I knew nothing. Does that make sense to any of you? That I'm actually excited to recognize that my inefficiencies in my perspective on the world is changed in this past hour and a half, and I thank you for that. As cheeseball as that sounds,
that's great.
You know what I mean? Thank you.
Yeah, I think you've changed a lot.
Wow. We'll see.
I'm happy to see it.
Well, the thing was, and I said this to Sean beforehand, is that I said to my wife before I sat down to stream, I was just like, God, I hope I don't say anything like racial, or I don't say anything inappropriate, or I don't say anything, because really I'm here to learn, and I just didn't want to say anything inappropriate. So I hope I didn't do that tonight with respect to any cultures or any gender that we were speaking about tonight. I really wanted to respect that tonight. So I appreciate any insight you guys gave me. Yeah. Was there any final thoughts on anything we touched on tonight, Hans?
Sure. Just give me a second.
Take your time.
Yeah, I guess like I just wanted to say, like, I don't think it matters like where you are, like whether you're in the boonies, really rural, isolated place like in Canada, in the middle of Canada, or up in the north, or in some thriving metropolis or cosmopolitan center. I don't think that matters, and I don't, especially now with the amount of things that you can connect to. I think it's just especially like, I think this is like an important thing to think about kids in school. There's so much pressure to like fit in, and fit in means like conform.
Yep.
And that can be like maybe detrimental to somebody who is open, and then they're open, so then something comes in and they go, holy, what is that? And then they start going and they gravitate towards that, and they start learning about it and checking it out and participating in it, and then people notice, word gets out, and then they get like, you're not conforming, you're not fitting in, and I think that's a critical moment, because like if everyone's just allowed to like be themselves and get into whatever it is that wherever their openness takes them, like you might get like you might get amazing combinations, like metal drummers who are super into Bulgarian music, and Greek music, and like fusion drummers who are super into, like, I don't know, like really like some kind of like, there are so many things. It's a big world out there, and encouraging people to be themselves and connect with the things that resonate with them, that light them up, means that everything that we do will just become richer. And in terms of the drums and the drum set, like I say, like the possibilities are just so, there's room for everybody. And in all the styles and in all the genres. And I think that's I think it's really crucial to impress that on young people when they're just getting going, because that's a critical stage. And if it's nourished and if it's encouraged, man, you could just get like these, like when they get to like 30 years old, they just be like total motherfuckers, and you're like, we've never even heard this before, and it's great, and that would probably, maybe that would also help to rectify the sexism thing that exists in drumming and drum set playing and music as well. Yeah. I'm not saying it would fix it, but maybe it would help.
Yeah. I do feel like I want to have a whole stream just on that topic in itself. Absolutely. Yeah. Do you feel like the world feels smaller right now because of the access to information is so accessible that when I want to know something, I can just look it up very quickly. If I want to hear something, I can just pick it up so quickly, as opposed to that classic, I've only heard bagpipe music in Scotland because there's no real other place to hear it. So I had to go to Scotland to listen to it. But now I can just look it up and hear it anywhere, for that matter. Or I can go to my local bagpipist and listen to it authentically. But yeah, I have access to all cultures if I want to go down that rabbit hole, right?
Yeah, I don't think the issue is whether or not you have access to those things.
Good.
I think the issue is how you are connecting with those things, because Perfect. You see in like a lot of like really young people, like their attention spans are tiny, and so the way they connect with things is like it's they're barely connecting with it at all. It's so thin and superficial.
It's utility, yeah.
Yeah, like it's like it doesn't even register. It doesn't even register. They don't even remember doing it like 10 minutes ago.
True.
Whereas, whether it's something that you got in the old school way, by going to a library, phoning someone, blah blah blah, going to the embassy, right? That was a way that you used to be able to like get into really cool music, is you could go to the Bulgarian embassy and be like, yo, can you give me all sorts of like folkloric Bulgarian music? And they'll be like, absolutely. And they'll give you like a box of stuff, yep. Right?
Awesome.
I mean, you can still do that, although it's kind of, there's so much access to other things, but whatever. I don't think I don't think that's the issue. I think it's how we are connecting with it is the important thing.
I love that. Natasha, what are your thoughts on tonight? Yeah.
Yeah, well, just going back to what Sean was talking about, I think the important thing for me is you don't have to understand everyone. You don't understand everything, but you have to respect it. And I think it's so important to explore these things, like as we've even noticed tonight, hearing each other speak. I mean, it's important to see what is outside of our little square here, and I think it just makes people better human beings to be able to see that, right, and see what's outside of your own life. And yeah, the nice thing about our access to technology and information is that is so available, and the people who want to access it will access it, right? If people are interested for a kind of look into ethnomusicology, there's a really great book from the University of London. It's from their ethnomusicology staff there, and it's called Pieces of the Musical World, Sounds and Cultures. And it's different ethnomusicologists and their research facility there. It's just stories of their own field work. And there's pictures, there's their field recordings, and then there's actually timed descriptions of those recordings. And man, even just like the first thing you read is just, you're able to connect it to your own life. And then they talk about, you know, political and historical things that are happening in that area at that time. And you can bounce off of that and look into that side of things. And there's just so much information in those things. And I think that's a really great resource for people who are just kind of want to dip their toes in and start looking into stuff.
I just dropped the link in chat for that book in particular.
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yes to all of that. We could have went a lot deeper tonight. This was highly educational. Thank you so much to both of you for our time. There were probably lots of things we didn't talk about. There's probably hundreds of things we didn't talk about. But if anybody knows Sean and I, but me in particular, I enjoy going on tangents. Tangents that's my middle name. I got two other middle names, but tangents is one of them. And I'll go on lots of tangents and ask questions as I'm just thinking about it. So I appreciate you guys humoring me tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I'm going to let you guys take you guys out here, and Sean and I'll just do a little recap, and we'll close her down. And I'll see you guys in a minute. Thanks, Hans. Thanks, Natasha.
Thank you.
Cheers. Oh, it's just you and me. Whoops. There you go. Virtual producer is where it's at.
Yeah, you did a good job there just now.
Oh, thank you. It's in my LinkedIn. I'm a virtual producer, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, I was aware of that.
Dude, that was good.
Yeah, it's fun. I love stuff like that. The whole committed to understanding and just even, I think it's just good to delve into, even if it's not ethno, even if it's just, you know, someone you don't have much in common with. Like, if you refuse to connect with them, then you're not ever going to know their story. And you never know. Like, you never know, even though maybe it doesn't fit, or it doesn't, like, well, they're a garbage truck driver, and, you know, they listen to country music, and I don't really, you know, I feel like I'm a cultural person, and I listen to jazz and klezmer music, and I don't see how we'd, but you never know. There's something that you two might have that's like, I just find the understanding of, and that's what I took away from this conversation, is ethnomusicology was a way to say, okay, once again, Western culture took upon itself to create itself as the best thing ever. So let's create something called ethnomusicology that helps people understand that that's such a small box, and there are bigger things outside of it. And I think that can't be anything but good when you start understanding. And especially, you know, we live on an island, and granted, you know, I think our little piece of the world is quite diverse, and we have a lot of sympathies and empathy for especially First Nations, and especially right now, at a time when lots of cultures are having to immigrate to Canada for various reasons.
Yes.
But Yeah, I think that's the obvious. It's like, I worked in a seniors care center for a while, and I never thought I'd have anything in common with some of those people, and I walked away with, lifelong sort of, just, there's two people specifically that I remember some of their stories and just things that they told me about, especially around parenting, because
Sure.
sort of it was connected in that way. But yeah,
those type of homes have a lot of culture being all smashed together as well.
Yeah, and even like people I didn't think I would connect with, and thought they had nothing to offer me. And when you start thinking that way, that's the danger. Like, it's, you don't know, like, the next hand you shake, whatever. I can't even quote
again. That's it.
I can't even quote myself.
I think my biggest takeaway tonight is curiosity. That if you remain curious, always remain curious.
Yeah.
And something that kind of resonated with me that Hans said is the how. How are you getting the information, right? Yeah. It's not just that you can, it's that on the heels of curiosity, you need to understand how and the why of why you're
absolutely
what you're doing. Intention always, right?
Yeah. And I think even like when we started doing these, and for me, it's always been my intention, even calling this show Off the Throne, was that I didn't want to do the obvious drummy, like perpetuating that. I wanted to bring ideals and concepts and topics to the forefront that, I don't fucking care how many paradiddles you can do in a row standing on your head while you're watching the Archies. I'm
That's
more
very
interested,
specific,
right?
Okay,
I know.
Go ahead.
I'm not going to tell you why I know that, but
okay.
I just have always wanted to delve a little deeper into, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and if nothing else, I've met people along my journey that I have nothing in common with them except that they're drummers, and that's interesting to me. Like, so then it's like, what's the commonality there? Because there must be, because it's almost a language that we all speak. Like, I think, probably once Natasha starts working as an X-ray technologist.
Oh, X-rayist.
X-ray.
Sorry, Natasha.
Okay.
Exact title.
That she'll learn.
It'll look great on a business card, though. Oh my God, it'll look so good on a business card.
But she'll learn a language that, through her coworkers in her new venture, that she'll have insight into people that then when she goes out through music, she may run into another X-ray. I'm such an idiot. X-rayologist or X-ray technician. That, you know what I mean? Like, it's just anything you learn, to me, is going to be another reason to connect with someone
in the health field. We're going to generalize.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it could be like how you're a virtual producer.
Okay, we're done here.
Okay. No, but if you run into another virtual producer, you're going to talk to that person.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're going to seek them out. I mean, not everyone is like me, where you'll just talk to a stranger on the street and, have all kinds of, like, restraining orders against you. But I just like,
place to be.
Some people need a reason to connect.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's always a good thing, because there's always commonality, and I've always believed you always will come to, okay, there's something you and I can agree upon.
Yeah. Well done. You just got to find it. Be curious. Yeah. Be curious, guys. Yeah. Okay. Let's wind her down here. I think you and I are good to go. It's getting late. This is fun, dude. This is good. Yeah. Let's keep her going. Any parting words? It's not going to be the last word, but any parting words, Sean, before we end her here?
Nothing other than,
cool.
There's a good quote, actually. There's a really good quote that Anthony Bourdain said prior to his passing. And as you know, Anthony toured all over the world and did what we do, except with food. And he definitely connected to cultures through food. Yes. And he even had it tattooed on him. He said, "Of all things I am certain, I am only certain of one thing, and that is I am certain of nothing.
Thanks, everybody.